La vita fa presto a riformare dei vincoli di quelli da cui
Life is quick in recreating bonds that replace those from which we have just freed ourselves. Anything we do, everywhere we go, we build walls around us, which are at first a shelter but soon become a prison.
Buonasera.
Good afternoon and welcome. This was a quote from the North Archives by Margherita Jursenar and with the notes of a piece by Debussy, we start our session devoted to one of the most difficult challenges of our time. The title is Beyond Walls. We prepared this session with Paolo Magri, Director of the Institute for International Policy, and Monica Maggioni, who unfortunately cannot be here with us for unforeseen personal circumstances. And she has asked me to tell you that she would have liked to be with you today. The things of life have taken me elsewhere, but what you will experience today is the result of something that we are working at together, from the walls space in the meeting to this great hall where we will have music, videos and speeches. Maybe we will not be giving all the answers and we won't be able to give any solution, but this gives us the space of complexity. So the building of walls, men that, as Margherita Jursenar says, feel protected by walls, but walls that then turn into our prisons. The dimension of a wall marks many different spheres of human experience. Sometimes they are physical walls, but they also are barriers of knowledge, of this inequality, of lack of communication, what separates men from men. So let's take this trip together with these sounds, images, voices, and with the people that we have involved in this meeting, who are actually protagonists of this year's edition of the meeting. There will be at 7 p.m. another meeting with one of our speakers today. So we have them here together in order to create an opportunity of exchange, of reflection on the theme of walls and what is beyond walls. So my first question, I'm asking to Monsignor Tomasi. What's the wall you had to face? What is the wall you have to face every day? I'm not going to introduce our guests one by one. You'll see their names on the screen behind us. So please forgive me if I do not introduce you with your very long and prestigious biography. We all know you are a great friend of the meeting. You have always participated in the different editions of the meeting. The walls along the paths of our life are many. We find them in different circumstances when we are met by problems. So we now talk about the wall of new migration flows that could create problems. We talk about the wall that makes it impossible to communicate. I'd say that there are two main approaches that each of us can adopt. One is an opening towards the others in order to defend our identity, our history, by meeting other people, by opening up to other people. Then the second approach is a defensive one, is an approach of closure. So these are two different approaches. One is an open approach, the other is an approach of closure. What I found really difficult, and I think this is a personal challenge for me, during my many years as I worked in the diplomatic services of the Holy See, while dealing with the international community, we could not work together defending the rights of human beings and trying to negotiate difficult situations to avoid conflicts, violent conflicts, and trying to create the prerequisites for a fair development in poorer countries. On all these themes, actually, we can work together also in terms of operational projects that can be very effective. But then a moment arrives when our joint path is interrupted. That's when the opportunity, the chance of a religious dialogue is put on the table. So this psychological wall, is it some kind of shyness? Is it a way that makes us stop our feelings, our personal ideals? Or is it a lack of goodwill in facing those values that could actually give a meaning to our lives? So, well, the question that is asked over and over again is this wall a wall that we can overcome? And how can we overcome this wall? How do we react when we have an intuition of our most important and deepest values, the meaning of life, the ability to interpret, to give an interpretation of everyday life in a very coherent way, in line with our identity. So let's now leave this question for a moment, and now let's listen to a very famous wall.
Lost control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone.
Immagini e suoni.
Well, these are sounds and images that we are all familiar with, I think, at least for my generation. And for these generations, for my generation, the fall of the Berlin Wall was the symbol of the end of all walls. It was the symbol of a Europe without walls. Those were the years of John Paul II, who was seen as a key element, as a protagonist of that sudden historical acceleration. This is how Joaquin Navarro Valls, who participated in the meeting a few years ago, and he was the spokesman, well known by everyone, of Pope John Paul II. How it will recount that moment, that event.
Il muro non è caduto con un esercito.
The wall fell with an army that tore it down because people had lost their fear. We were all surprised, but for the Pope, this was something that was bound to happen. I remember the words of Reagan in those years. He had a different point of view. It talked about the Soviet Union as the empire of evil. Well, the Pope would have never said that. It was a different language. The language of the Pope was a language that could make hope increase and avoid violence. The Pope and Kohl going through the Brandenburg Gate after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And he was really happy about this, because it had a great meaning not only for Germany and for its reunification, but for all the people that in that moment were free again. Great human tragedies can also be solved without recurring to violence. They can be solved with ideas that give a meaning to the lives of people.
Era quella.
So that was a moment, a period when everyone thought that a new world was beginning with less walls. It was the period of unity, of opening. But then, in the following years, we witnessed how many walls were built. Let's have a look at this video.
Must embrace our values and love our people. Embrace our values and love our people. And yes, we will build the wall. We've already started planning. It will be built. We will build the wall. We need it. We need
Paolo.
Paolo. Well, Trump's wall. Can you hear me? Trump's wall, the wall announced by Trump, wouldn't be only a physical barrier between two neighboring countries that have always been partners in many sectors. It wouldn't be only the longest wall in the world, 3,100 kilometers. It is actually also the focal point of a political strategy that has been created by this new president around walls. The Mexican wall would be the tangible wall, but there are so many other intangible walls, as for instance within the American society, between the white population and the others, the other people who live in the United States. The walls built with Iran and with Cuba, and the walls in terms of international trade. So this is a wall that, the Mexican wall, has just been announced. Trump talked about it yesterday again in Arizona. but we are not sure that it will be really built, and well, certainly not as quickly as Trump would like to see it built. Well, actually, between the United States and Mexico, there is already a wall that covers 1/3 of these 3,100 kilometers. There is a whole part made of desert and mountains, and then there are the federal police. But in spite of that, there are in the United States 11 billion illegal immigrants. So there is something that doesn't work, actually, in spite of all these barriers. And there is some resistance against this wall also for economic reasons. These illegal immigrants in the United States work in the United States for a very low wage, and they are really useful, for instance, for the agricultural sector. They pay $12 billion taxes every year, so they do have a certain weight. If the wall were built, the U.S. economy would lose about 2 points of the GDP, and this is not exactly what Trump promised to American citizens. Then there would be also political consequences. It would be a great offense for Mexicans, and the fact that Obrador might come or might go to the power in Mexico at the next elections because he is against Trump, well, this is quite probable. It's not very beneficial for the United States to stimulate this hostile approach in a neighboring country. So how do these doubts translate in the American system? The wall costs 30 billion. Trump has just found 1.6 billion and is fighting with the Congress in order to put the costs of the wall within the budget of next year. And yesterday in Arizona, he said, if we do not have the money for the wall, I will not approve the budget, and there will be a shutdown of the government, just like when Obama was president. So the damage that this wall might cause will rest with us anyway. Alejandro Marius arrived yesterday from Caracas, Venezuela. Welcome. It's an applause to you because of your long trip. So what's the wall you have to face every day? Thank you. Well, first of all, I must say that I was really moved by the video when they said that the Berlin Wall came down when people lost their fears. Well, my wall is fear. Fear to say what you really think. The fact that you are not free to say what you think. So it's a form of self-censorship. But this wall has different aspects. For instance, personal fear. Caracas is the most dangerous city in the world. 28,000 victims last year. 150,000 people were killed in 5 years. More than in the 8 years of the Iraq war. So I'm afraid for my 4 daughters, for my wife, for my colleagues. One of my daughters has been robbed just not far from home. And, everyone in Venezuela knows someone who's been murdered. So I'm really afraid to go out at night. At 8 o'clock, no one goes out. There are places where you cannot really go at night. And I am afraid for my colleagues, and we have a WhatsApp group. And at night, everyone writes on this group to say, yes, I'm home and I'm fine and I'm safe, because we know that they could have problems in getting home. Then there is another fear, the fear of illness, because we do not have pharmaceuticals. I suffered the experience of going to 4 or 5 different chemists' shops, and I couldn't find the pills I needed for the allergy of one of my daughters. And well, that scared me. And then there is the fear to work with the public. We started 8 years ago a social work. We do not work with local governments or regional or national governments, with any political party, because in such a polarized society, working with them or working with one of them means to be against the other. So we want to safeguard our identity in order to help all those who want to be trained to find a job independently from their political ideas. So these are my walls. These are my fears, the fear to lead a normal life. Thank you. Alessandro Rosina, there are other walls, the walls between generations. That's your field of work. Yes, we need to pay attention to the walls that make it impossible for new generations to reach their future goals. So, well, I would like to start from a movie, a book, and a song from The Wall, by the Pink Floyds, and you have already spoiled that, and then The Invisible Cities by Italo Calvini. So the idea is that each of us is or has a brick, and we can put our brick on an existing wall if we want to, and that would make the existing wall bigger and higher, or we can use our brick to put it on a bridge so that we can go a little bit farther on that bridge. So those who create a wall are those who are against everything that is new. Europe, in its darkest periods, in the Middle Ages, was dominated by fear, by uncertainty. It was very close. And the symbol of that period is that of small cities surrounded by very high walls, whereas our Europe, the Europe that the Catholics recognize, is that of the Renaissance, the Europe of development, culture, science, commerce. And the symbol of this Europe is Venice, among other things. Venice is made of bridges and is a bridge in itself, a bridge between the West and the East, between two different cultures that didn't want to destroy each other, but rather to understand each other, to get to know each other. And this idea to know the others is very well represented in the book by Italo Calvino, Invisible Cities, this idea to know more. Well, then it's us. It's up to us to decide what we want to do with our brick. If we want to build a higher wall or a stronger and longer bridge. Thank you. Gianpaolo Silvestri. So where do we want to put our bricks? Well, thank you. I'll start by, well, a personal anecdote, something that happened to me about 20 years ago. In 1996, I went to Africa. I had just graduated from university at the time, and I must add that 20 years later, and after hundreds of times I went to Africa, I can say that I this my first trip to Africa, I didn't understand anything. So I went to Uganda for some ANSVI projects. And I went to visit Father Tiboni, a missionary that I think, well, most of you know, who gave a great contribution to the missionary presence in Uganda. So he told me, how many shoes did you bring with you? And I said, well, 2 pairs of shoes. And so he said, well, then leave 1 pair here. I'll give it to some African who might need it. So this episode, which is very simple, made me really think and start to understand that the matter of development was something that could either touch me directly with a personal involvement on my part, otherwise it would not have made sense. So this first episode was, so to speak, the first fracture that in time made my wall fall. There was no longer a real distance between myself, while I'm trying to do something for these people, the so-called beneficiaries of our projects, and these people. Because it is very easy in my job to think that you're doing something, a project, for instance, for them, for these people. Actually, this is the wall that fell for me, because I no longer think that I'm doing something for them. I think we're doing something with them. And in a way, I'm doing it for myself, because the development issue is something that involves a change in myself. And this actually overcame the wall, the ideological wall, according to which everything can be solved through politics, because we are talking about poverty. No, we're talking about people here, people with serious, terrible problems, but who in the end are just like us. So what I learned is more than what I have tried to give. This is the wall that fell for me. The wall of this ideology, according to which the problem of development is just a political problem and not a problem that is really, that concerns us. Today, after 20 years, the problem of the migrants makes this situation quite clear. There is no longer us and them. We're all together, because these people arrive here and they ask us questions. And what used to be the developed world, and on the other side, the undeveloped or developing world, well, this is no longer there. Paolo Silvestri quoted Uganda. Uganda is the country of origin of Sister Rosemary and Rosemary Nirumbe. So what's your wall? So she was going to speak in English. We'll have an oversound translation. Thank you, Rosemary, for being here. Thank you.
First of all, being an African woman, I see the world as a strange terminology. Because I come from where? We live in round houses, and there's no need of protecting anything because we want others. And when I started hearing about the wall being built, what came to my mind is that the world is so big, the world is so big. Where is the world going to reach? And Who is building this wall and for what? What is the wall supposed to be hiding? I think if we look carefully, the world is the world of selfishness. The world is lack of acceptance of other people. With the world, we are trying to keep away people. It is not even a source of security at all. If we think it is a source of security, it is imaginary security. The bigger the wall, the more attention is created. When we have a wall, we give a picture to people to come and find out exactly what is behind. I come from a place very close to Congo border. There are so many customs stopping us. I have never seen any of the customs working. People go across Congo and come back to Uganda, and we do our things. We have created so many paths which no authority can find out. I would like to ask one question. How much money is being used to build a wall? And can that money be used to fight diseases in Africa? People have died in Africa for malaria for so many years. Why is that money not used to fight these diseases? Let us also think that we build and God destroys. We have seen great nations falling apart. And so there's nobody who can build a wall except God. Thank you so much.
Paolo, abbiamo...
So, Paolo, we have listened to many different aspects of different walls, and when we are talking about the money needed to build a wall. So, according to your opinion, what is the highest, biggest, most dangerous wall we need to face today? Well, I'm afraid that it is the wall we are building silently against Islam. From the Twin Towers onwards, and with all the terrorist attacks of the last few years, each of us has a small wall inside of themselves because we are afraid, and we are, in a way, rejecting the Islamic world and the Muslim people. Well, obviously, you are not the public of a right-wing political party assembly here. But if I ask you, have you ever had the opportunity to be in a square in one of our cities, and looking around you, you see a lot of people from the Maghreb countries, and you are kind of afraid of their presence? Or maybe you are on a train at night, and you are alone, and there are just a couple of people from Maghreb countries with you. Aren't you afraid? So this is the wall that is being built here. It is a very delicate issue, and this emerges from the attention that Pope Francis is very careful when he talks about these issues, whereas many politicians are not as careful. So when he talks about Islam, religion, religious war, radicalism, he's very cautious. It is a very difficult issue because it is something that really involves the public opinion. So this is something for which we are trying to find reason elements. And when we look at the terrorist attacks, we really make an effort to say, yes, of course, the attackers were all from Islam, but they are just, well, people who live on the borders of society. They're people who have difficult situations. So we try to say that we are not facing a radicalization of Islam, but rather an Islamization of radicalism. That is to say, a little bit of Islam that is used to hide young people who have been radicalized for different reasons. And we try to remember the figures, the statistics. Today in Europe, we have 50 people who have committed terrorist attacks in a community made of 50 million people only in the European Union. So, well, this is not enough. Italians have been asked in a survey, how many are the Muslims in Italy according to your opinion? And most answered 20%. They are 4%, not 20%. So we have this feeling that we are being invaded. 7 Italians out of 10 state that they are against Islam, that they are hostile to Islam. And this is a very delicate and difficult challenge because hostility doesn't allow us to carry out a fair integration politics, because hostility destroys the gray zone between communities living in the same territory and creates an us and a them, as we were saying before, which is something that happens in our society, but also in towards different countries, Islamic countries. So we are talking about 1/4 of the world population. So I think this is the biggest challenge we have to face, and it calls for a great commitment on the part of our communities. And the Islamic communities living with us will have to take up a more active role. We know they are against these attacks, but they need to overcome their way of living and say that they are victims as well. So they need to be very explicit in front of this risk.
Next, I said, compare our nature in respect of education and its lack to such an experience as this. Picture men dwelling in a sort of subterranean cavern with a long entrance open to the light on its entire width. Conceive them as having their legs and necks fettered from childhood, so that they remain in the same spot, able to look forward only, and prevented by the fetters from turning their heads. Picture further the light from a fire burning higher up and at a distance behind them, and between the fire and the prisoners, and above them, a road along which a low wall has been built, as the exhibitors of puppet shows have partitions before the men themselves, above which they show the puppets. All that I see, he said. See also then men carrying past the wall implements of all kind that rise above the wall, and human images and shapes of animals as well, rotten stone and wood and every material, some of these bearers presumably speaking and others silent. A strange image you speak of, he said, and strange prisoners. Like to us, I said. Like to us, for to begin with, tell me, do you think that these men would have seen anything of themselves or of one another except the shadows cast from the fire on the wall of the cave that fronted them? How could they, he said, if they were compelled to hold their heads unmoved through life? So our shadows reflected on the wall. So now let's try and tell ourselves and tell the others what's beyond this wall. Why is it worth to overcome the wall? How can the wall be overcome? Mr. Tomasi, you left us before with a question. Maybe you would like to start from this question. You can start from whatever you want. Well, beyond the wall, there can be very difficult questions to answer. As a young priest, I once decided to go with a group of Mexican migrants during the night through the border to enter the US territory. So we went. We would ignite fires and prepare some food in the evening, waiting for the darkness to go down. And then we would walk. We would go under the net that would divide the Canyon Zapata, so that valley dividing the United States from Mexico near Tijuana, and then we would enter the US territory. Since then, our question has always been with me. In other words, can the wall be overcome? But actually, between lawfulness and ethical correctness, where do we stand between being lawful and ethically correct? These are difficult questions. And these are the difficult questions that we may find beyond the walls. There are walls which create an obstacle to dialogue. There are walls of economic poverty. And it is really difficult to understand these walls. And yet, we need to face them. We need to make an effort to go beyond the walls and then try and find the reason why these walls should no longer exist. And there, something different comes to our mind. There's a new dimension that can emerge and that can enrich the human being and that open up whole new ways towards a future of solidarity where everybody can work and do our best for walls no longer to exist. Alejandro? So what is your answer to this question? What do we find beyond the walls? Before you talked about your wall in such a touching way. While the others were talking, I was thinking about the fact that it is fear that makes people erect walls in various fields. And I was thinking about the issue of the freedom of expression and self-censorship. So I am not going to talk about who generates fear because of this. But if you have to utter a word, you are challenged to be smarter, to be more intelligent, and to go deeper to the things you want to say without dwelling on specific topics. So if you have very few words to think and to say, you have to think more. Then there's another aspect, violence against ourselves. In my first answer, Monsignor, actually, you said that he's the boss here, so he was very, very fast. Can I add a minute? Do you agree, Mr. Tomasi, that I add a minute to my part? Because you are the boss, I've been told by Mr. Fontalan. This was a very, very interesting episode for me. As you probably know, in Venezuela, we've had lots of riots and clashes. In Venezuela, we've had repression. There are groups which do not agree with the government, and they believe that they can solve their problems using violence. There are lots of young people on the streets, and they think exactly like that. And sometimes they are in front of supermarkets, they are begging for food, but actually for their resistance. And I've always ignored them. I do not agree on the fact that violence can be a means to change things. But there was an episode. I was going out with my daughters. They are afraid of these people as well. So I told them that they should go immediately into the car, and I stopped and had a chat with these people. And actually asked them, if I give you food in the evening, what do you do in the evening? Actually, they say, well, there will be another one. When you reach your objective and the system changes, what will you do? And their answer was, well, I don't know. This is also part of my job. So my reply was, I know of a person, and this person can offer you the chance. What did you do before? And they answered, well, I worked as a mechanics. And others answered, telling what they did before. And I discovered in the eyes of these people that their true wish was not so much to change the system or maybe using violence, but rather what they lacked was a possibility, was an opportunity. They lacked opportunities for them. So their wish, and I could see this looking into their eyes, was that they had my same fear. So I won, they won, and now there's a whole work to do together, but that's going to be a very interesting work. Together with my daughters, while preparing this very challenging encounter, I also asked my daughters about fear, and they answered that they have become accustomed to forgive other people because they don't know if, for example, the day after, if they have a quarrel with their schoolmate, they don't know if they will have the chance to, so to say, see that schoolmate the day after. That girl might maybe be forced to flee the country. So that's why they've become accustomed to forgiveness. As regards opportunities, we do vocational training, we train young people. And understanding that violence stems from the lack of opportunities, and actually seeing people, meeting people, young people who are on drugs and who may work as mechanics or as carpenters is already in itself a way of overcoming this wall and going to the depth of the problem, to the problem that can cause this violence. And I'd like to end up with two things as regards pharmaceuticals, as regards drugs. Well, actually, it's incredible. Here in Italy, there are lots of people from Venezuela or Hispanics. There's an international solidarity network which makes use of many possible means known by Monsignor. So let's sort of say non-traditional ways. And through these ways, they make it possible for drugs to reach Venezuela. So if you have such a problem, still there is lots of sensibility. And these people, through solidarity, they can help you find the solution. Maybe a partial solution, but still a solution. So I fear that we're dealing with walls. And at the beginning, to begin with first by intuition, but then when you've overcome them because you're sure of that, these are walls that constantly grow, they continue growing. But in our heart, there is always something that pushes you to go beyond and to encounter the other, to meet the other, that helps you overcome the walls. It is like playing in the attack and not in the defense, to win the game and to meet the other, because this way you are sure of the fact that the one who can harm you has the very same nature that you have. So you can look into his eyes and you can find something positive that is useful for your life. So let's regain this part, this little minute that Alejandro actually conquered and who said very interesting things. We can regain this additional moment with Alessandro Rosina. Alessandro Rosina is a demographics expert, and he's going to be very short. I will try and be up to your expectations. So what do we find behind the wall, and why is it worth going beyond the wall? And I'd like to draw back to what has already been said. Beyond the wall, we have our wishes, our desires. In the long run, walls make us imprisoned within our fears. So going beyond the wall means freeing our wish to build a better life. In other words, seizing the opportunity to build a better life for ourselves. Wishes and desires always win against fears. So if there are those who blow on fears, what we need to do is to blow on wish, on desire. Only this way can we win. I'd like to quote another sentence by Italo Calvino. When you erect a wall, just think about what you leave outside. And what we leave outside is our desires, our wishes. And we need to start from there, because desire is always linked to a better world that we can build. And so I would like to close, and coming back to the question, if we have walls fall, we will have more bricks available to build bridges, and these bridges can lead us towards a desirable future. Thank you. As I promised, Alessandro Rosina was brave. Now, Paolo, you have the floor. Well, I have to say that what I found when I tried to knock down the wall of ideology was a very large, vast prairie. If you no longer have ideology, you are open to collaborate with everybody. There's the chance to work with anyone who has the desire, who wishes to walk a path together with no prejudice and with no censorship, especially in our world, in our developed world. It is now become evident that actually we cannot make it by ourselves. We need to team up with organizations, with institutions, NGOs, governments. In other words, we need to have collaboration. We need to have the chance to work together, starting from a common desire and starting from people. So from this point of view, I'd like to quote a sentence which has always been reassuring for me. It's a sentence by Pope Francis. And for the work I do, this is a really useful sentence. He pronounced this sentence in Florence in 2015 on the occasion of a national conference of the Italian Church. And I quote, "Just remember, the best way to communicate and to have a dialogue is not to talk and discuss, but rather it is that of doing something together, of building something together, of doing projects, not alone between Catholics, but rather together with all those who are of goodwill, and without any fear, without the fear of doing the necessary pathway which is necessary to any authentic dialogue. If you don't do this, it is impossible for you to understand the reasons of the other, and you cannot understand that your brother counts more than the positions that we deem far away from our certainties, because he will be our brother. It is only if we start from this kind of position, from this kind of experience, can the wall mentioned by Mr. Magri, so the wall of Islam, can be overcome. Based on our experience, based on the experience we are doing in the Muslim countries where we work, is it telling us exactly this. We have learned that we can collaborate starting from this, starting from doing things together. Something little that contributes to the common good, and that can start from people. We have made wonderful experience with people in Muslim countries, the Bekaa Valley, for example, dominated by the Hezbollah. And together we can do small things because there is this willingness, there is exactly this desire. So, Sister Rosemary, we know that on a daily basis you are overcoming the walls that were mentioned. So what do you find beyond these walls?
I can see the wall is going to create a new style of problem. Because behind this wall, when we stay too long, we shall think the food of our mothers is the best. We are going to fail to learn that other people are living a better life. We are going to fail to learn that these people can enrich our culture. We create walls by giving names, by calling people by their religions. And yet, when God created us, He did not say, Rosemary, you are a Catholic. He did not say, you are a Muslim. And when we reach in front of God, I always think He can easily ask us, who told you you are a Muslim or Catholic? In order for us to avoid new problems that will come, we have to learn to accept people. We have to know these people who come in our houses are going to enrich us. I think the wall can create a narrow. It can make us become myopic. It makes our horizon very, very small. I think all of us need to open up a little more. That is what I'm referring to as tolerance. Thank you.
Grazie, Suor Rosemary.
So, Paolo, in the world's geography, what's the wall? What do you see beyond the wall? Well, the wall is also something very high. And actually, if you are on top of something high, you can look to the distance, in the distance. So if we try and climb up, virtually climb up and stand on top of the walls that we are building in various ways, for example, towards the migrants. If we looked from the top of these walls, we would see some desperate people in these camps. But if we look in the distance, we can identify two topics: conflicts and the hunger from which these people have been fleeing. I am not optimistic concerning our short-term ability to improve conflict management, but I'm quite optimistic when it comes to the engagement, the efforts that we can put in place on development. The debate on development has been carried out, has now become a part of our daily discussions. It has now been discussed by governments. In the past, was being discussed by the Ministry for Economic Development. Now we have ministers discussing a common strategy for development. And this is being done for a utilitarian way in order to block migrants. But we should see actually the glass half full. And the positive aspect of this is that we can open up a new stage, a new era in our relationship with Africa. This is not going to be easy. We made a lot of mistakes in the past, and the money we are discussing this idea that we should help them where they live. Actually, these resources are very limited, and we have no recipes to do developments. But that's a new element. So if this positive attitude will be closely monitored and considered in order to generate more resources to build better equipped camps, and more solid borders, if we are more attentive, we can really have something positive stem from the wall. Thank you. So we have constructed this narrative made up of different voices, images, sounds, memories, to try and help all of us climb the wall and look beyond the wall, and then maybe overcome it, and then also discover what's beyond, as our guests told us with very interesting words and reflections. We have not proposed solutions, but there are facts. And so my invitation to you is actually to do this path, to go from the wall to what's beyond the wall. There are dimensions, there are facts that can help us, facts that we should look at in order to be supported in this pathway. Not being presumptive on this, and I'm saying that also the meeting is one of these facts, one of the many facts we have. And the meeting needs to be supported in turn in order for us to continue doing this, to continue enjoying your company and especially our speakers' intelligence and experience. In various areas in the Rimini meeting, you will see some booths for our fundraising campaign. This will help us become bigger and bigger. And beyond this, there are also other dimensions, other things. For example, the probably bigger dimension is art, music. We've listened to the ISPI Ballet before. And now, in the end of our session, we're going to listen to another beautiful piece. These pieces will help us with the deep meaning of beauty, and that's the reason why we tried to have this format and to be accompanied by beautiful voices, beautiful experiences, beautiful words, which are very deep, very important, and images, videos, as well as art and music. Good afternoon. I am really very lucky because I can deal with music, and that's really great. I live in Israel together with many other young boys and girls coming from the whole of the world, from Turkey, Russia, America, China, Brazil. When we dream, something great, true, and mysterious happens. And this conquers the heart of everybody. Beauty appears. I always think of Fernando, a friend of mine, a musician who plays the oboe, and when he plays, he really becomes transfigured. His face changes. Music opens up your heart to lots of questions. I can only say that it is clear, it is evident that when my heart meets something true and beautiful, my heart is taken. And music is a privileged tool to make me wonder what's beyond this beauty. And that's the reason why I would like to play one last piece called Mancanza. It's been composed by Emanuele, my brother. He's going to play tomorrow during a concert. This is very dear to me. This piece is very dear to me because when I am not content, if I am not contented with my small little place where I was born, what unites me more to my friends in Tel Aviv and to the whole world is this mancanza, this lack, the lack for which my heart is made of.
Bene.
While Bernadette Lorusco was playing this beautiful music, we could see the pictures of the Baxi murales, which decorate many walls and give life to many walls in many places in the world. I would like to thank all our speakers wholeheartedly. This is actually not the last part after the applause, but this is actually a part of this session. I would like everybody to make a big applause for this meeting. We really hope that we could accompany you in this journey. I would like to thank Mr. Tomasi, Alessandro Rosina, Alessandro Marius, Gianpaolo Silvestri, Sister Rosemary, Paolo Magri, Giampiero Bartolini, who read the pieces, and he will play in the Due di Emmaus performance taking place every day at 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. at the exhibition on the most beloved land by God. And Bernadette Lorusso, a violinist, in a performance, Un sussulto al cuore, that will take place tomorrow evening at 9:45 in Arena Spettacoli. Then my personal thanks to Chiara Longopifano, Silvia Santarelli, and Caterina Maggioni, and to Paolo Magri and Monica Maggioni, whom we would like to greet. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful future sessions of the meeting.